The first question is a good one. Where can we go for more information? In particular, what websites are available for more information? I'll put in a plug for the Maryland Department of the Environment website. You can search for Maryland Department of the Environment, or it's www.mde.state.md.us. On the front page, there are 6 tiles. One of them is the Marcellus Shale Safe Drilling Initiative. You click on that, and it'll take you to a lot of information. But I suspect that these folks, not only in preparing for this talk today, but for other reasons, have their own favorite websites that they might like to.
What Friends of Deep Creek Lake, the video of this, all the handout materials will be available on our website, which is friendsofdcl.org, and we will also post a link to the other websites that we know about. And if you have a website that's good for you, send that on, and we'll send that back out. Okay. So that way you can keep in touch with what's going on.
Is there any particular website any of the panel members want to put in a plug for?
The county's website, which is marcellusshale.garrettcounty.org, is the go-to spot for when meetings are scheduled and all of the latest resources.
That's
mm-hmm.
One source that I've found, I don't know if you can hear me or not. One source that I've found to be very useful for me is Google. We all Google most stuff. And you can sign up for Google Alerts. And that way every day you get the press of the day. It's got the industry perspective, it's got an environmental perspective, it's got a really good mix of articles. You can get it every morning. Just Google fracking and look for Google Alerts, and it'll keep you up to date.
It'll keep you busy, too, if you try to read all of it. The next question, what chemicals are in fracking water? I mentioned that there is a website called Frac Focus. I think it's fracfocus.org, which is an interactive website. It enables you to click on well locations, and you will get information about the chemicals that were used. Is there anybody on the panel want to comment on the fracking chemicals?
I won't comment on the fracking chemicals, but I will say that.
Oh.
Yeah, I will say don't focus overly much on the fracking chemicals. That has not, by and large, been the problem with the industry. It's something of a red herring. I actually think that it's something that the industry loves to see us all jabbering about, is what's in those chemicals. The problem is methane contamination. That's been the primary form of contamination.
I can be very, very brief here.
Please.
I want to pick up on what Paul said and reinforce what he said and then add to it. There are 2 breeds of cat here. One is hazardous materials. The other is hazardous waste. And we need to bear in mind one is an input and one is an output. The industry says we use about 12 categories of chemicals. I was able to get a list that has 106 different chemical compounds. That's just by way of saying there's hazardous materials that's stored, that's the input, and hazardous waste is the output.
Next question is who will do restoration at the site and when will that occur? This question might mean when the drilling is completed, who will restore the site? And the answer to that is clearly that the permittee, who has to post bond to cover the cost of properly reclaiming the site, will be responsible for that. But there are certainly other types of restoration that might take place in the event that there were incidents or releases. Is there a panel member who would like to address that? I will mention that the December report of the Governor's Advisory Commission, which is on our website, has a lengthy discussion of the current liability legal structure in Maryland and what might be done to change it. And there were recommendations from the Commission about how to change it. One that was enacted was a law that if a drinking water source within 2,500 feet of the vertical borehole becomes contaminated, there's a legal presumption that the company that did the drilling is liable for it, and it's up to them to disprove it rather than to have the person whose well was contaminated prove it. This levels the playing field a little bit. But the Commission also recommended that a Comprehensive Surface Owners Protection Act be written and introduced. There wasn't time to do that last year, but we are looking to do that this year. Is this a follow-up question?
Yes. If you're saying that only the well that's near the horizontal is protected, what about the water source along the horizontal? That's much longer and covers more land than the vertical.
Yes, that's absolutely true. As Paul mentioned a moment ago, the big problem or the problem that we know most about from drilling incidents occurs in the vertical borehole. It's not migration of fracking fluid from the horizontal, which is about a mile down, but it's more a case of failures of the casing or cement that cause the release of either fracking fluids or the migration of methane. If you are more than 2,500 feet away from the vertical borehole and you think your well has been contaminated, you can still sue the company, and they would be liable if you can prove that they were responsible for it. No, let's go with the written questions for a while, if that's okay. The setback for Deep Creek Lake, how does that really protect the Deep Creek Lake property if the drilling can be done horizontally as well?
Since we don't have a person from zoning here, what I will do is forward that on to the chair of the county commissioners and ask for a response. So it will probably come out in the newspaper, and we'll also post it on our website. That's in order to get accurate information.
From the
by very nature of the process, borehole goes down outside the border, and then you can go horizontal right back inside.
I can't speak to the interpretation of the county law. It sounded as if it was only that many feet from the vertical borehole. I don't know. State law and property law would prohibit the horizontal segment of the well from impinging on any property that wasn't leased. So that would act as one control. Okay.
More education.
Yeah, there is a lot more education for all of us needed. One thing the drilling companies do very well is to track where their drill bit is. They need to stay within the formation, and they submit that information to the department, and we compare it to the leased property. I really don't think that there's a very significant risk of that. There's a question, are leases still being aggressively pursued or sought out by drilling companies in Garrett and Allegheny counties? Consensus seems to be that leases are being allowed to expire and new leases are not being aggressively sought. Question, we've been talking both about mineral rights and gas rights. What's the difference? Mineral rights is a broader term. It can encompass coal, oil, gas. Gas is just one type of mineral, so it all depends on what the lease says. There's a question, what's the minimum amount of acreage I would have to have in order to sign a lease? The answer is that there's no minimum acreage. The drilling companies want to assemble contiguous properties that are large enough for them to drill their wells. And if if they can't get it, they have to go around your property, and so there is no minimum. Question, if 30 to 40% of the fracking water comes back out of the well, that leaves 60 to 70% of the 3 to 5 million gallons still in the ground. What does that mean for our wells? Anybody? Some of these questions are too technical for this panel to really adequately address. There are more answers to it, but does anyone want to comment on that?
I guess I object to saying that it's too technical. Yeah. Well, let's think about the Texas Eastern Storage Field. The average depth of that field is 7,250 feet. The groundwater is within 500 to 1,000 feet of the surface. So there's a minimum of about a mile of rock between the reservoir that's being tapped and the groundwater. And once you release the pressure on a well, water will tend to go down, not be forced up.
Hey, Billy, a question for you, because you do own a good amount of land. Okay, it's a simple fact that, you know, once the gas comes up, once it's put in a container, you know, up around that wells, the storage area where you are there pipes that you have to go over, you know, land, you know, for transmission of that gas from the well site to the storage site? And, you know, does that affect you as a property owner?
To my knowledge, all natural gas is handled in pipelines.
Does that go over your land?
Maybe not all, but the vast majority.
The pipelines are ordinarily buried. Each well has to ultimately be connected to a pipeline and then to an interstate pipeline so that it can be delivered to the customers. One concern we have is the proliferation of these pipelines could cause fragmentation of valuable habitat and forest. And one of the best practices that we're looking at, and something that DNR has strongly recommended, is that there be a comprehensive plan, both for the well pad and the location of any pipelines and roads and ancillary equipment, so that that impact can be minimized, and perhaps there can be co-location of those pipelines and other equipment from different well sites to minimize the impact.
A quick add-on, which didn't get covered. If you get your drinking water from a well and you're somewhere near one of the sites, I would urge you to, as we're getting the baseline on the streams, you want a baseline on your well. Hopefully the county will help facilitate a group purchase so we can get a discount. Right now it's fairly expensive. We will post information on where you can get those your well tested now. It's a broad spectrum, so how much it costs? Smokey, do you know?
It ranges.
It huh? $30. No, but not for the full spectrum of all the chemicals you need to get the baseline.
It's about $1,000.
About $1,000, says Paul. So this is something, and then we have to appreciate the fact that there may be lake property owners who might have the capacity to spend that, but then what do we do with people who don't in the county? And I think we need to be very careful about that and be sure that everybody gets their well tested, their well waters tested.
I just want to mention one thing about the casing failure and the picture that Mr. Bischoff was drawing about the water table in relation to the resource. It's true, the water table is generally well above the resource, but of course we have to drill through the water to get to the resource. And now we've created a way for that material that was way down at the bottom to get to the top now, because we've drilled all these wells with casings that leak. Yeah,
that does emphasize again the importance of the integrity of the casing and the cement. And questions have been raised about how often that casing is tested during the life of the well, and when repairs are made, and what happens when the well is finally closed out. The answer is that will likely be among the best practices that we will be addressing. But when the well is finally closed, the borehole is again filled with cement. It is usually not required to be, currently it's not required to be tested after that.
Just wanted to make sure that everyone knew how important the baseline study is, and that is something that it just doesn't seem like anyone should be opposing that aspect of it. To that end, there are a couple wells in neighboring states that are beside tributaries to Maryland streams, one on Laurel Run and one on Salt Block Run. And both of those have, about a year ago, I guess, right, Smokey, had a full-time treatment, or a full-time monitor installed. And so that's a good thing for our security, and we need to make sure that happens everywhere. One other little-known fact about the word fracking is every water well, if you're on a water well, every water well gets finished with a fracking. So that's an aspect of drilling a water well, the same as it is the others. There's no indication in my mind, at least that I've been able to determine, that doing it on the horizontal is any different than doing it on the vertical.
I would refer you on that issue to a fact sheet that's on MDE's website that talks about the different types of fracking of water wells, more conventional fracking of oil and gas wells, and high-volume slick water fracturing, which is what is being talked about now. This question is about the economy and taxes. Taxes typically discourage corporation from operating in areas that are taxed. Maryland is already small potatoes in the larger picture of shale gas extraction. There are lots of places they can go in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. How does the increased taxation balance versus revenues from development that may decline without shale exploration?
I don't know how to answer that any better than I did already, so I don't know what I have to add.
It seems like that's a whole new program.
Yes. Okay. There were a lot of questions about the handling of the flowback fracking water that comes back out of the wells. Questions about how it will be handled on site, where it will be disposed of, will it be disposed of in Maryland? Is EPA involved in handling that? I'll give a little bit of information, and perhaps the panel will want to supplement it. Currently, the Maryland regulations allow pits and ponds, lined pits and ponds on gas sites, but there is better technology now, closed cycle fracking, where the flowback is captured in tanks. So there's a very distinct possibility that will be the case in Maryland. The industry has moved from disposing most of the flowback to recycling it as long as they can, and then disposing of it. This saves them on fresh water and also reduces their disposal cost. So the amount that's being disposed of per well has declined, but it is still a big problem to dispose of it, and currently the only approved method is injection in deep disposal wells. Maryland has no such wells and is unlikely to get any. There are a bunch in Ohio where there have been incidents of earthquakes and other problems from injecting this water for disposal. EPA regulates the disposal of fracking flowback as wastewater. It cannot be discharged directly to surface water, even after treatment, but it can be treated in publicly owned wastewater treatment plants and disposed if they have the capability of handling it. In Pennsylvania, wastewater treatment plants were accepting it without the ability to properly treat it, and were discharging only partially treated water. Pennsylvania has now acted to stop that practice, and we don't intend to, well, we intend to learn from Pennsylvania's mistakes, let me put it that way. Would anyone else like to talk about the fracking fluid?
I just want to mention, Bridget mentioned the most recent cases in Ohio being connected to injection wells. In fact, there are many other states that have drawn this connection as well. There have been injection wells closed in Arkansas 2 years ago. It's been studied in Oklahoma. It's been studied in Texas. There are federal lawsuits about it in Louisiana. So we only hear about Ohio because it's the recent one, but there's a long history of this, actually.
Again, a perspective. If we twist the question just a bit and make the question be this: how much of the practices will be voluntary and how much of those will be regulated? Now, let's be candid. There is pressure to drill, baby, drill that says trust, no regulations, that will allow for the jobs and the economy. The other pressure is to say best management practices can in fact be put into regulation, and then it's trust but verify, and who's watching the watchers. So I want to push it up just a bit and acknowledge the question should be, what is the public policy in terms of those two pressures, and how do we balance those in order to have adequate protection and adequate oversight?
We get the question a lot about how much, the quantity of water, what's it equate to? And for those of you familiar with the pool that we have here now at the excellent resource across the college here, that pool contains about, it would take about 6 or 7 of those pools to frack a well. So if that helps you put it in terms of how much water it is. No. The volume to frack is between 3 and 5.
So you're saying it's 1 million in the pool?
No, I'm saying it takes 6 to 8 pools. So I think there's the figure that was given to me was 500,000 or 600,000. So
it's another multiplication problem. That's 15 pools.
Wait, is this new information?
must be.
So where does that 8 billion gallons of water come from? Is it a state resource? Is it a local resource? And who has the right to sell it to the operators?
I don't want to encourage questions from the audience, but I will answer that one. In Maryland, no one can appropriate water from either surface or groundwater in excess of some minimal value without getting a permit from the department. And the department requires that those permit decisions be made in the context of balancing the protection of the resource and the need for the water, and whether the water is reasonably needed or not. In the Susquehanna River Basin, the water is frequently taken from surface water, from streams, where there are flow-by restrictions, that is minimum levels of water that have to remain in the stream. And during this recent drought, several companies had to stop taking water from those streams in order to preserve the ecological value. That is the same kind of approach that Maryland takes. The companies that had planned to frack in Maryland were getting their water from, I think, Frostburg and from someplace in West Virginia, which was water that was legally being appropriated by the towns, and they had excess and they could sell it. We are luckily in a relatively water-rich area, but our groundwater resources are very limited. I don't foresee that groundwater would be made available for fracking. Yes?
It may not be an issue at all, because the new technology is
right now using CO2 because you get the carbon credits for sequestering the carbon. Also, Chevron is using gas to frack in New York State, where they put a moratorium on, on the chemicals, so they're just using gas to frack the next well down the line.
Yeah, there are other technologies. It costs a gas company, what, $5 to $10 million to drill a single well, and they don't want to take chances on technology that's not proven. I've even heard presentations on using solid rocket propellant to fracture the wells. I think that as the technology develops, there will be better ways to do it, ways that will use much less or no water, and I look forward to that time. There were several questions about what kind of bad thing. I'm sorry, Eric.
I lost my question to that.
Go ahead, Eric.
Well, my question was for you specifically.
I'm the moderator. I don't have to answer questions.
But it's about the commission and what's been going on, because they weren't able to get agency funding or industry funding. It seems like everybody's been talking about getting some of these best practices, but also all of the information ahead of time. We want to make sure we know what the studies are, what's going on. But you guys aren't able to get the money for that. And we have a deadline. You showed that in the beginning slide. It seems like there's going to be a clash of deadlines versus no money versus having all the information for the studies. Would you guys be supportive of maybe like a legislative moratorium, something to help solidify that we're not going to do something until we have that information?
My department has not taken a position on that. I know that Delegate Shane Robinson from Montgomery County has announced that he's going to introduce a bill that would ban fracking in Maryland.
This isn't about banning. This is about letting you guys get the information for your study.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, and that is, in fact, the topic that I wanted to turn to. There have been a lot of questions handed up about, what bad things could happen, and how would we even know they were happening, and so the question of getting the baseline data and what kind of monitoring needs to be done are very important. It's true that the departments did not get any additional funding for these studies. We're trying to do them with available resources. We've shaken the coins out of the sofa and managed to enter into a contract with Appalachian Labs up here to do some studies for us on the best practices. DNR has been doing some of its own monitoring and working with the volunteer organizations to do it. MDE was able to fund a group within DNR to do a methane well survey. We're never going to have all the information. We're going to make the decisions and recommendations we have to make with the best information we have. When we have it, we'll make it on the basis of science and the facts. And there's some policy overlays to those decisions, too. But I thought the panel members might want to talk a little bit about the importance both of baseline monitoring and ongoing monitoring.
I'll let others do that, but I just want to mention that Bridget said the commission hadn't been able to get the money. The reason the commission hasn't been able to get the money is because the industry has blocked the legislation 2 years in a row, just as the industry has opposed a transfer or a production tax in Maryland. Again, I mean, this is a very, very powerful industry in Annapolis, and this is one of the things that the commission is hoping we can do is stand up adequate regulations before we get into a situation as in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, where development rushed forward without significant regulations in place, without adequate regulations in place, and then it's nearly impossible to get those bills passed in the legislature because the development is ongoing and the industry is making a lot of money. So it's a very complicated thing. I think there will be some pressure at the state level to look at legislative moratorium. And I urge everybody to come out on August 20th to the Governor's Commission meeting where there'll be a lot of more public opportunity for participation there also. That's it. It's here at the Garrett College Auditorium. That's a week from 6 to 9.
Yes, that meeting will be from 6 to 9 in the auditorium on Monday the 20th. There'll be 3 short presentations. Some of it you will have seen today, sort of the ABCs of Marcellus Shale. The departments will talk about the work that they've been doing so far. The Advisory Commission will give a report on what it's done and what it's doing, and then hopefully we will have a significant amount of time for public comment. The current plans are to open a sign-up sheet for public comment at about 5:30. That's half an hour before the program will start, and we anticipate that there will be a great many speakers, and so we're going to limit people to 3 minutes.
I wanted to say, okay, is there something that you can do? Yes, there is. I spent a lot of time this morning, and there have been compliments about the volunteer monitoring program. Let me give you a caution there. That's the cheap and easy way to do it. Okay? What happened in terms of the context is that the number of continuous monitors at the key locations has not been put into the state budget. So volunteer monitoring then becomes 2 things. It becomes a pressure to say, wait a minute, we've got 70 plus people who are willing to invest their time in monitoring and detecting, but that should not be seen as a substitute for continuous monitoring and detectors in the appropriate streams and waterways. That's by way of saying there's something that you can do, and that is to support MDE and DNR against what Paul referenced as the push by the oil and gas industry, oh, we don't need this, everything is fine. Everything isn't fine, and you can push back against that vested interest by saying, wait a minute, put the money in there to get these detectors in place so that we're not, in essence, subsidizing gas and oil with voluntary effort.
Okay.
Can I say something, please?
Yes.
We have, a simple thing is, if you would take a picture of, not picture, but a picture of whatever they bring back and have those people take a drink of it, then you could say that that's okay. You can't do it any other darn way.
You tell them that.
Okay. I'm going to close this meeting with just one other question. A question was handed up asking, does this panel really know what it's talking about? And how many of them have ever been to a drill site or a fracking site or a closed well site? And I'm sure some people in the audience can answer this too. If you've been to a fracking site, raise your hand. All right, we have a lot of people with firsthand knowledge here. So I'm going to turn this back to Barbara now to wrap up the program. Thank you.
I'm wrapping up by saying thank you. This is pretty impressive. This many people have stayed this long. I think we give ourselves all a round of applause for all the learning. Everybody gets an A+.